A quiet star system sat at the very edge of human space, far from busy trade routes and far from any alien politics. It was the kind of place most travelers ignored, because on the map it looked empty and unimportant. Planets were small, the sun was dim, and the system had nothing valuable like rare minerals or large settlements. To almost everyone, it was a forgotten corner of the galaxy. But humans had learned something important over the years. A quiet place is the best place to hide important things. On one of the small airless moons in that system, humans had built a research outpost. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a group of metal boxes stuck into the ground. No glowing shields, no towers, no heavy weapons. Just silent buildings, half buried under dust, with only a few blinking lights giving away that it was a live dot inside. However, scientists and engineers were running some of the most important work humanity had ever attempted. They were studying survival, how humans could adapt to harsher worlds, colder planets, hotter climates, and more dangerous environments. The galaxy was huge, and humans knew they couldn't stay on safe planets forever. Survival meant expanding, and expanding meant learning how to live anywhere. Because the project was sensitive, the outpost kept communication low. They avoided sending long messages or signals that could attract attention. They assumed this kept them safe, but they hadn't counted on the Vrax Dominion. The Vrax were a proud alien empire with a growing military and a habit of taking what they wanted. They believed they were the most advanced species in their region of space. Their ships were sleek, sharp-edged, and covered in bright symbols that announced their power. Their soldiers believed no other species could challenge them. When one of their patrols detected strange energy readings coming from the small moon, they assumed it was a hidden military base. They didn't bother checking what species it belonged to. They didn't even bother scanning deeply. They simply believed, if someone is hiding something, it must be a threat dot. So the Vrax commander ordered the attack. It was a clean strike fast, direct, and meant to impress the rest of the empire. A bright flash crossed the moon's surface as a focused energy beam hit the outpost. Dust and debris rose like a silent cloud. The Vrax ships watched the destruction from orbit, proud of what they had done. Moments later, the commander composed a broadcast message. His voice was confident, almost amused. He declared that the Vrax Dominion had eliminated a weak and primitive enemy facility. He spoke as though he had done something heroic, something worth celebrating. And he sent that message across open channels, to be heard by anyone. Across the galaxy, other species listened. And almost instantly, they froze. Many of them had learned sometimes the hard way, that humans were not a species you insult or provoke without consequences. Humans were calm, friendly, and eager to work with others, but only until someone threatened them. Anyone who had studied human history knew how quickly humans could respond to danger. One ambassador from another species put it simply, if the Vrax attacked humans, the war has already begun, even if humans haven't said it yet. Meanwhile, back on Earth and in human colonies, the message finally reached human communication centers. Operators listened, confused at first, then horrified. The destroyed outpost had people working inside, scientists, engineers, support crew. They weren't soldiers. They weren't hiding a weapon. They were simply doing research to help humanity survive new worlds. The footage showed the moment the outpost vanished. There was silence in the room when the recording ended. Even across different human planets, the reaction was the same: shock, anger, and a slow-burning determination that spread like wildfire. Humans didn't react instantly. They didn't shout or threaten. They didn't fire back blindly. They simply pulled up all data connected to the Vrax Dominion, analyzed their military strength, studied their political groups, and reviewed every past conflict involving them. It didn't take long for a pattern to appear. Vrax liked easy targets. They picked on smaller settlements. They hit first and apologized never. Humans understood what that meant across human space. Leaders met through secure channels. Military officials, diplomats, and scientists shared information. Many spoke calmly, but everyone could feel the same weight in the air. This wasn't just an attack on a building. This was an attack on humanity's future, on their right to explore, and on their people who worked peacefully in a remote corner of space. After several hours of discussion, one question remained. How should humans answer? The final decision was simple, but powerful. A single message was prepared. It was short. It carried no threats, no insults, no dramatic language. It didn't need any of that. Humans believed in making their point clearly and letting their actions speak later. The message read, "Acknowledged. You have declared war." When this message was transmitted toward the Vrax Dominion, the galaxy felt as if a cold wind had swept across the stars. On hundreds of alien worlds, governments paused their work and began preparing for what they feared would follow. People whispered to each other in markets, in stations, and in underground bunkers. Tales about humans, some true, some exaggerated, began spreading again. The Vrax didn't understand their reaction at first. To them, humans looked unimpressive on the surface. They didn't have the biggest empire. They weren't the oldest species. Their ships weren't the shiniest or the fastest. What the Vrax didn't understand was what every other species already knew. Humans were dangerous not because of numbers or technology, but because of what they were. Humans evolved on a planet filled with storms, floods, earthquakes, diseases, and animals that hunted them for food. They survived because they learned to adapt to anything. They survived because they stood together when threatened. And once they committed to a goal, whether it was exploring space or defending themselves, they never stopped. Back on Earth, in the central command halls, lights flickered to life on giant strategy screens. Human fleets began warming their engines. Pilots prepared their ships. Ground forces reviewed missions that had never been used before, crafted exactly for situations like this. But the preparation wasn't rushed. Humans were careful planners. They gathered every detail they could about Vrax technology and tactics. They studied old battles the Vrax fought, the layout of their border systems, and even their communication habits. If the Vrax wanted a war, humans would make sure they understood exactly who they had challenged. Meanwhile, the message humans had sent reached the Vrax leadership. The leaders read the words, confused. To them, humans looked like a small power. Why would a primitive species dare to challenge an empire as mighty as the Vrax Dominion? They laughed. They dismissed the message. They assumed this would be easy. Other empires watched this with a sense of quiet dread. They knew what the Vrax did not. Humanity never used loud threats. They never bragged or boasted. They simply acted. And when humans acted, the galaxy changed. The quiet system where the outpost had once stood was now only the beginning. The signal that had traveled across space was more than a response. It was a warning. A calm, cold, final warning. And the Vrax Dominion had no idea how much danger they were in. Many species across the galaxy had their own opinions about humans. Some saw them as friendly explorers. Some saw them as stubborn troublemakers. Some admired their courage, while others avoided them because they found humans unpredictable. But almost every species agreed on one thing. Humans were not a simple species. Long before the Vrax attack, many alien observers had studied humans in quiet. They tried to understand how a species that looked so harmless could survive on a planet that felt more like a training ground for disaster. Even the planets humans called friendly were considered too dangerous by most civilizations. The storms were too violent, the animals too aggressive, the diseases too creative, and the climate too unpredictable. If humans weren't so cheerful most of the time, other species might have feared them sooner. After the Vrax destroyed the hidden outpost, that fear returned quickly. Reports began spreading again, old files were reopened, and stories that had been ignored for years were suddenly important. People wanted to remember exactly what humans were capable of, because everyone knew that the Vrax had made a mistake that would not end quietly. The first reports reached Vrax intelligence teams within hours. Their analysts sat in clean, silent rooms, reading descriptions of human evolution, human behavior, and human conflict history. At first, they treated it like any other threat assessment. But the more they read, the more uneasy they became. One report talked about the human ability to keep running long after other species would collapse. Another report said humans could survive temperatures that should be impossible for a mammal. Another detailed how humans had gone from primitive tools to starships in an unbelievably short time. And then there were the psychological notes. Humans were emotional, creative, and very quick to change strategies when something failed. That part worried the analysts the most. Most species in the galaxy followed predictable battle patterns. Once you studied them, you could guess their next move. But humans changed plans instantly if they needed to. They didn't freeze under pressure. Instead, they got more focused. A Vrax officer read one line in an old file and frowned. Humans don't fear failure. They use it. To the Vrax, who believed failure was shameful, this concept made no sense. How could a species improve by losing? Why would anyone allow themselves to struggle, learn, and grow from mistakes? The idea felt backward and uncomfortable. But that wasn't the part that scared them. The real fear came from the next part: how fast humans learned. There were reports showing how humans could watch a new technology, copy it, improve it, and sometimes even make it stronger than the original. Some alien scientists compared humans to sponges. They absorbed knowledge at an alarming rate, especially when under threat. And now humans were very much under threat. While the Vrax read these reports, humanity had already started its preparations. Across their colonies, people tightened defenses, updated ship systems, and made sure communication lines were secure. Engineers checked engines and weapons. Pilots trained in simulators until their eyes burned. Ground teams prepared equipment that had only been used in emergencies. The interesting thing about humans was that they could be peaceful for years, even decades. But once danger came, a switch inside them changed. They became focused, serious, and incredibly united. Minor disagreements didn't matter anymore. Arguments that once filled meetings simply vanished. Everyone had the same goal: protect humanity. Across the galaxy, diplomats from other species shared quiet conversations. Some of them even felt sorry for the Vrax. They knew what was coming, even if the Vrax did not. Many ambassadors had seen human forces in action before during emergencies, rescues, and rare conflicts. They remembered how humans fought not just with weapons, but with determination that made them seem almost unstoppable. One ambassador described humans in a meeting by saying, "They don't win because of technology. They win because they refuse to lose." Meanwhile, the Vrax Dominion studied more files. One section talked about the human brain, how it was wired for problem-solving under stress. Another file described a historical event where humans survived in frozen wastelands for months. Another revealed how humans once built shelters and farms in deserts that other species considered lifeless. There were also mentions of odd human habits, like running toward danger to help strangers, or fighting natural disasters without hesitation, or pushing their bodies too. Limits that shocked medical scientists. Intelligence teams didn't understand how humans were supposed to be primitive. When they could do all this, some Vrax officials dismissed the reports, claiming they were exaggerated. But others were less confident. They remembered seeing videos of humans in difficult situations, where they kept going long after their bodies should have quit. They remembered hearing stories about humans solving problems during space accidents, repairing ships while floating in freezing vacuum, or keeping calm during emergencies that would break. Most species mentally dot. The Vrax leaders didn't want to believe the warnings. Pride blinded them. They thought humanity was just another minor species, pretending to be bigger than it was. They believed humans were loud talkers with small weapons. They believed the war would be short. Their mistake was thinking humans fought like everyone else. Back in human space, civilian volunteers signed up to help. Factories switched to emergency production. Workers repaired old ships that had been sitting in storage for years. Families supported each other and prepared for long nights. Children asked why everyone looked so serious. People answered with calm voices. Someone attacked us. We have to defend ourselves. Despite the tension, humans didn't panic. They had been through worse. Their history was full of hardship, disasters, and challenges that made them stronger. The first official human broadcast after the outpost attack wasn't angry or emotional. It was calm, steady, and carried the weight of a species that had survived everything their homeworld had thrown at them. The message spread across human colonies. We will respond with strength, but with discipline. We protect our people. We defend our future. The Vrax intercepted that message too. Some laughed at the calm tone. Others felt something uncomfortable growing in their stomachs. It wasn't fear yet, but it was close. One Vrax advisor pointed out a detail that others ignored. Humans didn't scream or threaten. They didn't show desperation. Their voices were controlled, steady. That alone was enough to make experienced commanders uneasy. In many cultures, anger meant emotion. Emotion meant weakness. But humans were strange. When they became calm, truly calm, it often meant they had made a final decision. A decision they intended to see through to the end. As the Vrax continued reviewing intelligence, they found sections describing human cooperation. Humans fought among themselves sometimes, yes, but when they felt threatened from outside, they dropped everything and united instantly. They formed groups, alliances, and strategies faster than many empires could comprehend. The Vrax had underestimated this completely. They had expected confusion. Instead, humans displayed perfect coordination. They had expected fear. Instead, humans showed determination. They had expected weakness. Instead, humans prepared like a species built for conflict. Meanwhile, someone in a Vrax intelligence room read a line that caused him to freeze. Humans do not see themselves as fragile. They see themselves as adaptable. This was one of the most dangerous traits in warfare. A fragile species hides. An adaptable species changes. And changing during war often leads to victory. The Vrax Dominion had wanted a quick show of force, something to display their power. Instead, they had awakened a species that did not know how to surrender. Humanity's fleets continued their preparations. Engineers shared ideas on how to improve shields. Pilots exchanged tactics. Scientists offered upgrades to weapons and scanners. Civilians worked through the night to support the military. Everyone contributed something, even if it was small. In a dark room deep within Human Command headquarters, a strategist studied a star map with quiet focus. His voice was calm when he spoke. We adapt. That's what humans do. The Vrax will learn that soon, and they would learn it faster than anyone expected. The galaxy watched silently as humanity moved, not with panic, but with purpose. Other species whispered among themselves, afraid of what was coming, yet unable to look away. They knew the truth. The Vrax had not simply attacked a small research outpost. They had challenged a species that had survived hurricanes, volcanoes, ice ages, predators, toxic plants, and diseases long before it ever touched the stars. And now the Vrax had given humans a reason to fight as one. The most dangerous thing in the Earth's galaxy was not a weapon or a warship. It was a determined human population with a clear goal. And that goal was now set. The first real clash between humans and the Vrax happened near a bright pair of stars that circled each other like dancing flames. This place was far from human space and far from Vrax home territory. It was a quiet part of the galaxy where only the occasional research ship passed by. The silence of that region made the coming battle even more strange. Like a storm appearing on a clear day, human ships entered the system first. They weren't the biggest ships in the galaxy, and they didn't have the fanciest designs. But each one carried careful engineering, smart technology, and crews who had trained for months without rest. The fleet moved in an organized formation, their engines humbling the silence of the system. The humans weren't there to start a war. The war had already begun the moment the Vrax destroyed the research outpost. Now the humans were there to understand their enemy, to see how the Vrax fought, how they reacted, and what their weaknesses were. Humans didn't waste time guessing. They learned by seeing. A few hours later, Vrax ships arrived on the opposite side of the system. Sleek, sharp, and brightly marked with symbols of their empire. They moved like hunters confident that they owned the space around them. Their commanders believed the humans would panic when they saw the advanced Vrax fleet. But when the humans saw them appear, there was no panic, only calm. The Vrax's first message echoed through the communication channels. It was filled with arrogance, telling the humans to surrender or be destroyed. The human commander listened in silence, then simply turned off the audio and continued preparing the fleet. There was no reply. Humans didn't argue. They didn't shout. They acted. When the Vrax realized the humans weren't responding, they assumed the humans must be scared. They believed silence meant fear. They had no idea that silence meant something else. Focus. Both fleets slowly approached each other. The twin stars lit the ships with a soft glow, giving the whole scene an eerie, almost peaceful look. But within every ship, humans checked consoles, tightened straps, breathed deeply, and waited for the moment everything would begin. Then it happened. A Vrax ship fired a warning shot. It wasn't aimed to hit anything. It was meant to scare the humans, to shake their confidence. It didn't work. Humans stayed in formation, unmoving. The Vrax commander grew irritated and ordered a second shot, this time closer. A blue beam streaked across the space between the fleets, cutting through the darkness. Still, the humans didn't react. The Vrax thought the humans were frozen, confused, or unsure. But inside the human flagship, the commander was watching every movement, measuring every detail, and quietly preparing to test the Vrax's abilities. When the Vrax finally fired a real shot, one aimed directly at a human vessel, the battle truly began. A human ship was hit along one side. Metal melted, alarms blared, and the ship shook violently. The Vrax expected it to retreat or fall apart, but the ship did something the Vrax did not expect. It kept moving forward, even damaged, even with sparks flying inside. Humans continued to fight. To the Vrax, this looked impossible. Every species they had fought in the past backed away when damaged. A hit meant weakness, and weakness meant retreat. But humans had always been different. They didn't run from challenges. They grew stronger in the face of them. Another human ship took a hit, and again it continued forward. Human engineers worked fast, sealing off damaged sections, stabilizing power, and compensating for systems that had gone offline. They acted with the calm focus of people who had trained for moments exactly like this. The Vrax became confused. Their strategy manual didn't explain how to deal with an enemy that refused to retreat. And then, before the Vrax could adjust their thinking, the human fleet opened fire It wasn't a wild attack. It was controlled, precise, and carefully aimed. Human ships targeted weaker spots in the wrack shields, firing small but effective bursts that slipped through the cracks. The wrack shields flickered, weakened, and in some cases broke. The first wrack ship to lose its shield panicked. Its captain ordered a retreat, but the other wrack's commanders yelled for him to stay in formation. Confusion spread through their fleet. They weren't used to an enemy that followed no familiar pattern. Humans didn't follow patterns. They adapted. Within moments, the battle turned from a simple show of force into something the wracks hadn't prepared for. Human ships split into smaller groups, moving like streams of water around rocks. Each group targeted a different angle, forcing the wracks to shift positions again and again. The more the wracks shifted, the more mistakes they made. One wrack ship pulled too far from its formation, exposing its side. A human vessel darted close, fired a disabling shot, and backed away before the wracks could respond. The disabled wrack ship floated helplessly as human drones latched onto its hull, cutting into the outer layers to take control. Another ship faced engine trouble after a precise human strike. The wracks tried to stabilize, but humans were already adjusting their next move. They didn't celebrate, didn't hesitate. They kept studying the battle like a puzzle they needed to solve. For the first time, real fear touched the wracks' commanders. They had studied human technology, but not human behavior. They had prepared for a fight of power, not a fight of adaptability. And now they were learning too late that humans were far more dangerous than they appeared. A wracks officer shouted for reinforcements. Another told him to wait, because they were supposed to win easily. The fleet leaders argued among themselves, confused and disorganized. Humans, on the other hand, worked like a single mind, even damaged, even tired, even pushed to their limits. They kept moving forward. The wracks fired a concentrated blast at a human destroyer. The hit tore open part of its hull and sent pieces drifting into space. But instead of falling apart, the ship rotated, repositioned itself, and fired back with a perfectly aimed shot that cracked a wrack's cruiser's shield. A damaged human ship fighting back with that kind of accuracy shocked the wrack's commanders. They didn't understand how humans were still standing, let alone fighting so efficiently. In truth, humans were fueled by something stronger than fear or anger. They were fueled by the memory of the outpost that had been destroyed, the people who had been lost, and the message they had sent: "You have declared war." The battle continued for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. And in those minutes, the wracks realized something frightening. They were losing control. Not losing the entire battle, not yet, but losing control. Their formation was breaking. Their communication channels were clogged with arguments and panic. And worse, human drones had hacked into several wrack systems, allowing them to disable weapons without destroying ships. The moment the first wrack ship was taken intact, the galaxy would change. The humans planned it. They didn't want to destroy everything. They wanted to learn. They wanted to understand the wrack's technology so they could prepare better for the real war, the one that was still coming. Toward the end of the clash, the wracks decided to retreat. They claimed it was a tactical repositioning, but everyone saw the truth. They didn't want to face humans any longer that day. Human ships didn't chase. They simply watched the wracks leave, silent and steady, like predators waiting for the next move. Once the wracks disappeared from view, human crews began repairing their ships. There was no celebration, no cheering. They knew this was only the beginning. That night, across human space, the footage from the battle played on screens. People watched human ships pushing through damage, adapting in seconds, fighting even when the odds were against them. Families watched with pride. Workers in factories whispered that if humans could fight like this, they could win. Pilots viewing the recordings felt a fire in their hearts. Even people far from the warfront felt the same thought rising inside them. Humans do not back down. Not now. Not ever. In the Vrax Dominion, the reaction was completely different. Commanders shouted at each other, blaming one another for the failed strategy. Analysts rewrote their files, trying to understand how human ships survived hits that should have disabled them. Citizens whispered fearfully about human persistence. The Vrax Council held a secret meeting that night, asking one urgent question: what have we awakened? But the truth was clear. They hadn't awakened something new. They had simply reminded humans of what they had always been: a species built for survival, a species shaped by challenge, species that never stopped learning. And now, humanity had begun learning the Vrax. The first battle was over, but the real war was only beginning. The Vrax Dominion had always believed they were the hunters of the galaxy. They thought every other species was weaker, slower, or less intelligent than them. For decades, they had built their empire by pushing smaller civilizations aside and taking whatever resources they wanted. Most species didn't fight back. They were too afraid or too underprepared. Because of this long history of easy victories, the Vrax never imagined they would meet a species that could turn their confidence into fear. After the first clash, near the twin stars, that fear began to grow. At first, the Vrax tried to hide it. They told their people the battle had been a training test, and that everything was under control. They claimed the humans only got lucky. But the truth spread quietly anyway. Officers whispered the details to their families. Engineers talked about the strange damage reports they found on returning ships. And analysts exchanged frightened looks when reading human behavior files. The Vrax Dominion was learning something. Knew something uncomfortable. They had not attacked a weak species. They had attacked a species that learned faster than they could imagine. Meanwhile, humanity did not waste time. While the Vrax argued among themselves, human forces were already adapting. The data from the first battle was analyzed frame by frame, ship by ship, error by error. Human engineers sat at long metal tables, discussing upgrades. Pilots reviewed their maneuvers to see what could be improved. Commanders talked through new strategies that matched the Vrax fighting style. Humans were not reacting with panic or anger. They were reacting with precision. This confused the Vrax even more. On one of the Vrax border planets, military officers met in a tall building with wide glass windows. They played holograms of the human ships during the battle. They paused the recordings again and again, trying to understand how humans fought so effectively, even while damaged. How did they keep going after losing parts of their ship? One officer said, they shouldn't be able to fire while patching hull sections. Another added, they're not acting normal. A third muttered, but humans were acting normal for humans. They had trained themselves to stay calm in chaos. They had practiced how to operate with missing systems. They had learned how to adapt when their plans fell apart. This was the part of human nature the Vrax had never understood. To the Vrax, order meant strength, and anything unexpected meant disaster. But for humans, the unexpected was simply another puzzle to solve. And that puzzle was now the Vrax Dominion. Over the next few days, strange things began happening on Vrax-controlled planets. In one city, a power station suddenly shut down. Not permanently, not violently, just long enough to cause confusion. In another place, communication towers malfunctioned for a few minutes, scrambling local signals. On a mining asteroid, security drones froze in place for 30 seconds before restarting. None of these incidents caused destruction. No one was harmed. But each event carried the same hidden message. Humans were studying them. The Vrax tried to hide these incidents, but the truth spread fast within the military. Someone whispered, "They are already here." Another replied, "They're testing our systems." Engineers examined the glitches and discovered evidence of foreign signals. ones they had never seen before. The signals came from humans. Human infiltration units had been deployed across Vrax territory, quietly observing, quietly learning, and quietly testing everything the Vrax had. This terrified the Vrax. Leadership in a way that open battle never could. The Vrax were used to direct attacks, explosions, invasions, and loud threats. But humans weren't fighting like that. They were fighting with subtlety, with intelligence, and with patience. The Vrax commanders met again, this time more urgently. They slammed data pads on tables and yelled across the room. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Some begged for negotiations. Some insisted the humans were bluffing. Others argued that bluffing was not a human trait humans acted, not threatened, while the Vrax were trapped in arguments. Humanity prepared Phase 2 of their strategy. One of the Vrax border worlds, protected by tall metal towers and thick shields, suddenly reported movement on its outskirts. At first, guards believed it was a natural disturbance. But when scanners were activated, they showed something shocking humans had landed on the planet. Not a large number, not an invasion force, just enough to create confusion. The security teams rushed to respond, expecting a violent fight. But what they found confused them even more. Humans were inside the buildings without breaking doors. They had moved through vents, maintenance shafts, and blind spots. They had left markers, tools, and data pads in places the Vrax thought were secure. The message was clear: we can get in whenever we want. This frightened the Vrax more than any weapon. These human units didn't destroy equipment. They didn't harm anyone. They simply appeared, collected information, and vanished like shadows. Guards later said the humans moved strangely calmly, quietly, and with no wasted steps. They didn't rush. They didn't panic. They seemed to know the layout of Vrax buildings better than the Vrax themselves. News of this infiltration spread fast across the Dominion. Soldiers began double-checking doors. Officers avoided walking alone at night. Engineers added security locks everywhere. But deep down, all of them knew that locks wouldn't stop humans. Humans didn't rely on brute force. They relied on creativity. While this was happening, the Vrax decided to launch a counter-invasion against a human colony. They believed taking control of one human planet would force humanity to negotiate. They believed humans wouldn't want to risk losing a colony. They were wrong. The Vrax assembled a large fleet and attacked a quiet human settlement that had only a small defense force. They expected surrender within minutes. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a perfect human strategy. The colony had already been evacuated days earlier. Humans had predicted the attack. They left behind structures filled with automated systems that scrambled Vrax scanners. Drones flew in unpredictable patterns, confusing the Vrax targeting software. Mines activated only when Vrax ships approached specific angles. And then came the final surprise. Hidden human fleets rose from behind the planet's moon, surrounding the Vrax forces from every side. The Vrax tried to retreat, but the humans had already closed every exit. Within minutes, communication channels filled with Vrax voices yelling orders, arguing, panicking. Their ships could not form formations. Their engines overheated. Their shields flickered like dying lights. The humans did not destroy the Vrax fleet. They didn't need to. They simply disabled engines, shut down weapons, and captured ship after ship. A shockwave of realization spread across the Vrax Dominion. Humans understood them now. They understood their flight patterns, their shield frequencies, their engine timing, their communication style. Humans adapted so quickly that it felt supernatural to the Vrax, even though it was simply human determination and intelligence working at full strength. Across the galaxy, other species watched the reports. Some watched with fear, some with awe, some with quiet satisfaction. Every species knew what the Vrax had just discovered. The moment humans understood an enemy, everything changed. The Vrax Military Council met late at night, trying to regain control. They were sweating, anxious, and snapping at one another. The footage of humans calmly walking through Vrax spaces played on loop. The battle reports from the failed counter-invasion filled screens. One council member said, the words they had all been avoiding. We thought we were the predators. But now we see the truth. The room fell silent. Humans were not predators in the traditional sense. They didn't hunt for pleasure. They didn't conquer for power. But when threatened, when pushed, they became something unstoppable. The Vrax had become the prey without realizing it. Their empire, once confident and bold, was now filled with fear and confusion. Their people whispered worries in markets. Their soldiers walked in groups. Their leaders met behind closed doors. They tried to hold on to control, but they could feel it, slipping. The worst part was that humans were not celebrating. They weren't laughing or bragging. They weren't sending threatening messages. Their silence was far more frightening, because silence meant they were preparing for the next step. Humanity had learned everything they needed to know. No. The Vrax had to face the consequences. Predator had changed. The hunted had become the hunter. And the galaxy watched with silent hearts, knowing something big was coming. Across the Vrax dominion, fear was spreading faster than any official announcement. Nobody had expected things to turn this way. For so long, the Vrax believed their empire was unshakable, something no species could challenge. But humanity had broken that belief without even meaning to. The silence coming from Earth was what frightened the Vrax the most. It wasn't the kind of silence you get from weakness or defeat. It wasn't the silence of unprepared victims. It was the silence of a species, planning something carefully. Every Vrax officer could feel that something big was coming, but they didn't know when or how. They only knew one thing: humans had stopped reacting. Humans were now acting. On one of the Vrax command stations, the high-ranking officers gathered again around a long oval table that was filled with holographic maps. They were tired, tense, and visibly anxious. Some rubbed their hands together. Others paced near the walls. No one sat comfortably. They replayed footage from the lost fleet, slowly and painfully. Human ships moved like they knew every Vrax weakness. Their patterns were unpredictable, almost playful. They dodged attacks by moving in ways no Vrax ship ever attempted. One officer whispered, "How did they learn this fast?" Another replied shakily, "We underestimated them. We thought they were simple." But simplicity was another thing the Vrax misunderstood. Humans weren't simple. They just acted simple when observing quietly. Once they understood a threat, everything changed. And now the Vrax Empire was the threat. While the Vrax struggled with confusion, humans continued their preparations with calm focus. On a human space station orbiting a distant moon, technicians worked long hours upgrading equipment. Engineers adjusted shield frequencies to counter Vrax energy beams. Pilots practiced new maneuvers in zero-gravity arenas. In one training hall, humans repeated simulations of Vrax attack formations until every movement felt effortless. They practiced dodging, closing distances, breaking patterns, and surprising the enemy. Their trainers reminded them to stay adaptive, not to follow strict rules. Vrax ships think in straight lines. "You don't," one trainer said as the pilots gathered around. Humans nodded. They understood something important. They didn't need to match the Vrax. They only needed to be better at changing. While these preparations continued, human analysts studied the captured Vrax ships. They found design flaws, power weaknesses, and communication gaps. Nothing was perfect, but humans didn't need perfection. They only needed opportunities. One analyst laughed softly as she looked at the data. They built their whole empire on ships that don't know how to turn properly, she said while others smiled. It wasn't cruelty, it was disbelief. The Vracs had been acting superior for so long, yet their technology showed laziness, like they never expected an enemy to think differently. Meanwhile, on the Vrac side, things were collapsing quietly. Soldiers on distant border outposts began reporting strange sightings, quick shadows that vanished before scanners could lock on. Some swore they saw humans moving across cliffs or climbing tall structures with ease. Others heard strange sounds from ventilation shafts. Though no evidence was found afterward, the Vrax officers dismissed these as imagination at first. But as reports increased, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Humans were everywhere and nowhere, visible and invisible, predictable and unpredictable. This made the Vrax nervous in ways they had never felt before. For the first time, the Vrax soldiers started patrolling in pairs, then in groups of 4. Lights were kept on all night inside bases. Security drones hovered constantly, scanning corners and rooftops. And yet, the fear did not decrease. It grew. Then came the night that changed everything. On a massive Vrax world called Karos Prime, the capital of one of their sectors, alarms rang across the sky. The Vrax believed it was a direct human attack. Panic filled the streets. People ran into shelters. Military flyers rushed into formation. But when they checked the skies, there were no human fleets. Instead, the attack came from inside the city. Screens across the capital suddenly turned black. Then a simple message appeared, written in a calm, neutral font. "We see everything now." The Vrax public stared at the words with frozen expressions. They had no idea what it meant. Officers shouted orders. Soldiers ran into the streets. But the message wasn't meant to cause destruction. It was meant to deliver truth. Within minutes, thousands of doors in government buildings unlocked. Power grids flickered. Communication hubs stopped responding. And somewhere deep underground, in a special military vault, a few Vrax guards discovered that their entire archive of classified documents had been neatly rearranged. Not stolen, not damaged. Just moved from one shelf to another, labeled in human writing. The Vrax guards trembled in fear. Humans didn't need to break things. They only needed to show they could. Across the city, citizens whispered in shock. Some believed humans had physically entered the capital. Others thought humans had hacked their systems. The truth was even more unsettling. Humans had done both. Vrax soldiers rushed into the streets, searching for any human presence. But humans had already left. They melted into shadows, slipped into tunnels, or escaped through air ducts. They didn't brag, didn't boast, and didn't celebrate. To the Vrax, this made them even scarier. After the incident, the Vrax Council called an emergency meeting. They looked exhausted and frightened. The leader of the council finally spoke. "We started this conflict thinking we understood humans. We didn't. We thought they were a lesser species. They aren't. They are something far more dangerous than we imagined." Silence filled the room. Then another council member added, "They don't destroy. They don't conquer. They adapt. They infiltrate. They learn. And they learn faster than we can react." This was the truth the Vrax had tried to avoid facing. They weren't dealing with a species trying to survive. They were dealing with a species that knew how to turn disadvantage into advantage. While the Vrax argued desperately about what to do next. Humans made their next move. A human, fleet larger than anything the Vrax had seen before, began assembling near a distant nebula. Not as a threatening line of warships, but as a coordinated formation of vessels that moved with purpose. Scouts flew in wide arcs. Stealth ships disappeared into clouds of cosmic dust. Supply carriers followed behind, keeping perfect pace. Humanity wasn't rushing. They were preparing. On one of the human command ships, a senior commander stood on the observation deck, watching the nebula glow like a vast curtain of light. She spoke calmly to her crew. "We will not attack blindly. We will not force destruction. We will show them what humanity really is." Her crew nodded with quiet determination. Every person in the room believed the same thing. They were not the aggressors, but they would finish what the Vrax had started. Back in the Vrax Dominion, rumors spread like wildfire. Some believed the humans would invade every Vrax world. Others believed humans were planning to dismantle the Dominion government. Others whispered that humans might replace the Vrax as the dominant species in the region. Fear had turned into uncertainty. Uncertainty had turned into confusion. Confusion was now turning into surrender. But humans did not want surrender through fear. They wanted understanding. The Vrax leadership, however, didn't grasp this. They only saw danger. They believed humans wanted revenge. They prepared for a final battle they knew they could not win. Vrax citizens watched the skies with trembling hands. They didn't know what humans would do next. Every sound, every light, every vibration made them tense. But instead of attacking, humans did something entirely unexpected. They contacted the Vrax. A simple message arrived on the main Vrax communication network. "You attacked us without reason. We responded with caution. Now you know what we are capable of. We do not seek to destroy your people. We seek peace, but only peace built on honesty and respect." The message was not angry, not threatening, just firm. The Vrax leadership stared at the words for a long time. Humans were not asking for surrender. They were asking for truth. For the first time in generations, the Vrax Dominion faced a choice they had never imagined: continue fighting and lose everything, or listen to the species they had underestimated. The quiet from the human fleet, the calm tone of the message, the precision of every move humans had made. It all pointed to one fact: the next step was coming. Step that would reshape everything. The galaxy held its breath. The message from the message. Humans spread across the Vrax Dominion faster than any order from their own leaders. Screens in homes, stations, and public squares displayed the same simple lines, calm and clear. Even though the words were gentle, the meaning behind them carried incredible weight. Everyone knew that the humans had nothing left to prove. They had shown their strength, their intelligence, and their ability to reach the heart of the Dominion without firing a single direct shot. And now they were giving the Vrax a chance. Many citizens read the message again and again, trying to understand what kind of species would do this. Most empires, when pushed to such an extreme, would demand surrender or revenge. But humans weren't doing either. They were offering peace, but not weak peace built on respect, truth, and responsibility. It confused many Vrax, but it also created something new inside them. Hope. Inside the Vrax High Council chamber, the leaders sat in silence. For the first time in their history, they truly didn't know what to say. Their pride, their traditions, their old beliefs. None of it helped now. The oldest council member finally broke the silence. "We started this," he admitted softly. "We believed they were beneath us. We believed their silence meant weakness. But their silence meant patience." No one argued. They all felt the same truth pressing on their minds. Another council member looked across the room with tired eyes. "If we continue the war, we will lose everything. Our worlds, our stations, our people. And humans will not even need to use their full strength." The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then the leader of the council gave a slow nod, as if accepting something he had fought against for far too long. "We must ask for peace," he said. Those words changed the fate of their entire empire. While the Vrax leadership worked through the decision, the human fleet stayed perfectly still near the nebula. They didn't move closer. They didn't threaten. They didn't broadcast warnings. Instead, they waited patiently, giving the Vrax time to think. The calmness of the human fleet made them even more mysterious and respected. It was as if humanity was saying, "We will not force peace on you. You must choose it." On one human ship, crew members watched incoming reports. When news arrived that the Vrax Council had called for a full meeting to discuss surrendering the officer responsible for the original attack, the crew exchanged quiet looks. One of them spoke gently. "They're scared." Another replied, "They should be. Not because we want to harm them, but because they finally understand what we are." Humans weren't celebrating. There were no cheers, no excitement. The atmosphere across humanity's fleet was surprisingly calm. They weren't looking for glory or domination. They were waiting for the right step, the step that would end everything without unnecessary pain. Back in the Dominion, the Vrax leader made the announcement publicly. For the first time, he spoke not with authority, but with honesty. His voice trembled slightly, not from fear of the humans, but from the weight of admitting his own empire's mistake. He told the citizens the truth. The Dominion had attacked humans for no reason. They had destroyed a human outpost without checking, without asking, without caution. And they had mocked humans right after doing it. Thinking nothing would happen. Now, he explained, humanity had asked for only one thing: justice, not revenge. The crowd, listening to his speech, stayed silent. They didn't shout. They didn't protest. They didn't argue. They simply listened, because deep down, they already knew the truth. Many of them had already guessed who the humans wanted. The commander who ordered the attack was brought to the council chamber, his posture stiff and defensive. He tried to speak, but the leader lifted his hand to stop him. "We cannot protect you," the leader said. "What you started has nearly destroyed us." The commander tried to justify himself. He spoke about pride, dominance, the fear of human expansion. But the council didn't listen. They had heard enough. They knew now that arrogance, not strategy, had guided the original decision. Within hours, the Vrax contacted the human fleet. Their message was short, but full of emotion. "We accept responsibility. We offer the commander who began this conflict. And we ask for peace." On the bridge of the human command ship, the message was played out loud. The room stayed silent for a moment, everyone processing what it meant. When the human commander responded, her voice was gentle. "Bring him forward. And then we will talk peace." The transfer happened carefully. The Vrax did not want to show weakness in front of their own people, but they also understood humans valued honesty more than pride. So a small Vrax shuttle approached the human flagship, carrying the commander. There was no escort, no guards, no tricks. Just acceptance. As the shuttle entered the human hangar, Vrax officers watched from control stations back home, nervous and shaking. They feared what humans would do next. Some imagined harsh punishment. Others worried that humans would use this moment to humiliate the Dominion. But humans didn't do any of that. When the Vrax commander stepped out of the shuttle, he didn't see chains, cages, or angry soldiers waiting. He saw calm faces. Human officers stood in a neat formation, not to intimidate him, but to show order and fairness. The human commander stepped forward and spoke in a level tone. "You will answer for your actions. Not your people. Not your soldiers. Only you." The Vrax commander lowered his head, accepting defeat. But he didn't feel hatred anymore. He felt something else: relief. Because deep down, he knew humans weren't here to destroy anyone. They were here to end the cycle of fear and misunderstanding. Once the transfer was completed, humanity sent their final message to the Vrax Dominion and all nearby empires. This message became Liege,